Let me read to you a passage from the 6th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 43 to 49. It's the Gospel for Saturday of the 23rd week of Ordinary Time. St. Luke writes, Jesus said, "No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes, or grapes from briars. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and the evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For out of the overflow of his heart his mouth speaks. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? I will show you what he is like who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice. He is like a man building a house, who digs down deep and laid the foundations on rock. When the flood came, the torrent struck that house, but could not shake it, because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed, and its destruction was complete." That's from Luke chapter 6, verses 43 to 49. Our Lord refers there to the good tree. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, our Lord says. The preeminent example of this is Jesus Christ, but there are many lesser examples of it. In August of 2011, there was shown on Sydney television a program portraying the exploits of a couple of Navy servicemen who died in the Second World War and who were being considered for a posthumous award of the Victoria Cross for outstanding bravery. One was an ordinary sailor who chose to remain on his sinking ship in order to man an anti-aircraft gun and defend from the ship, from his sinking ship, his companions who had on orders abandoned ship. From the sinking ship he kept firing at the Japanese aircraft, which, after having bombed the ship, were now attacking from the air the survivors who were clinging to flotsam in the sea. That lone sailor managed to bring down a few of the enemy aircraft as he himself sank with the ship. It was his own choice to remain on the doomed craft, and he did so because he saw that his numerous companions, now in the water ahead of him, were being subjected to merciless fire from the air. The point was made by commentators that it was high heroism to take the step of remaining on board to operate the gun when it plainly meant certain death. Right then, his ship was going down. What did the sailor have in him that enabled him to do such a thing? Well, let us not try to answer such a question here. Rather, let us be reminded of our Lord's words in today's Gospel. No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognized by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes, or grapes from briars. The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. Luke chapter 6, verse 43 to 49. Another example. During the same war, away in a concentration camp in Germany, the camp authorities selected certain prisoners to be shot in reprisal for others having escaped. One who was selected collapsed in fear. Then out of the ranks behind him stepped forward another who voluntarily took his place. He was a Catholic priest, Saint Maximilian Kolbe. He died heroically, taking a step for the sake of another, which he knew meant certain death. He was another instance of a tree bearing good fruit. But the greatest instance of all this was Jesus Christ. Consider him. There was nothing good that Jesus Christ could not do. His powers over nature, over the underworld, and his power over heaven itself had no limit. At a word, he could remove any physical affliction, subdue the raging sea, feed the multitudes, raise the dead, strike terror in the demons, reduce his opponents to silence. He could do anything, provided it was not evil. Had he chosen, the world would have been at his feet, as we might say. And a strong inkling of this is given at the beginning of the Gospel, when there is a meeting between him and Satan. Satan offers him the world, if he would but worship him. Now Satan would not offer the world to someone who did not have it in him to be master of the world. Satan could see that this man was someone who had never had nor would ever have an equal. He certainly could master the world, and if he, Satan, could get his allegiance, he would throw his demonic weight behind such a man's ambitions. All this, the kingdoms of the world, will I give you, he said to Jesus, if you will but worship me. Christ could do anything, and if he had a mind for it, he could have had anything for the asking. But here we have a man with the utmost natural power, who was possessed of the highest holiness. As his disciples said of him, and as the demons said of him, he was the Holy One of God. The Holy One of God. And what did he do with his power in the final analysis? How did he choose to exercise it in the supreme moment? That sailor, that priest, how did they choose to exercise their freedom in the supreme moment? By laying down their lives for their companions. Jesus Christ saw the world, for the world was his, and he had come into his own, and he saw its plight. It was sunk in sin and death, the wages of sin being death. He took the world's sin on his own shoulders and expiated for it all, by his sufferings and death. His sufferings were embraced by him in order to take away the sin of the world. We ought measure his sufferings not primarily by imagining the extent of suffering involved in a crucifixion, but by trying to imagine the weight of the sin of the world. It is unimaginable and incalculable. This is how our Lord used his great power. The point, though, which I would like to make is that the archetype of the good tree bearing good fruit is Jesus Christ himself. We asked, what did that sailor have in him that led him to do what he did? He was an instance of the good tree that was able to bear the fruit of heroism. But how wondrous the tree, we might say, that was Jesus Christ. He bore the fruit that was the redemption of the world by taking upon himself such incalculable sufferings, when he could so easily have done something else. Never was there a tunnel so dark as the one he chose to enter for our sakes. Christ loved me, St. Paul writes, and gave himself up for me. Let us resolve to live in union with him so as to bear fruit, his fruit that will last.